Today's webinar entitled Transformational Philanthropy. Today's webinar will be presented by John Severson, who is a co-founder of Severson, Strage & Company and is a senior fee-only financial planner. John was among the first in the nation to obtain his CAP, Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy designation. He also completed the Heritage Planning Program from the Heritage Institute and earned his CHP, Certified Heritage Professional designation. John has more alphabet soup behind his name than anyone else I know and incorporates each one of them while specializing in comprehensive and integrated planning. Before I turn it over to John, please hold your questions till the end of the presentation to where we will field them from the GoToWebinar chat toolbox. This webinar will be recorded and available on our website along with the presentation materials. Thank you again for joining us. I'll be back at the end for questions and closing. Now I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Elaine. Welcome, everybody. Glad that you could join us today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that is transformational philanthropy. And we're going to discuss exactly what that is here in a little bit. Here's who I am. Today I'm wearing my Transition Point Business Advisor hat. That's a sister company to Severson, Strage & Company. And it's through that division that we do what we call heritage planning with higher net worth families. And we'll tell you a little bit more about the Heritage Institute and who developed a lot of the research that we're going to be talking about today. So here's our agenda. We're going to be looking at about 7 different themes, and then we're going to talk about levels of understanding as we talk with our donors and our clients, and then we're going to talk about creating multi-generational transformational philanthropy. Boy, that's a mouthful, isn't it? And multi-generational, of course, is really between generations and passing on values from one generation to the next, and one of the best values we can pass on is the value of philanthropy. We're going to talk to you about more specifically how that can be done, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience and even talk about some next steps. So with that, here are the themes. The 7 themes. First, we're going to talk about mindset is everything. We'll talk to you about how that works. And then we're going to talk about what they say is fact and what we say is opinion. Silence is golden. And it's all about their desired outcomes and not your organization's needs. We're going to unleash the motivation that already exists in your donors and then prepare you to give you some quiet confidence to make these approaches. And then finally, we're going to talk about the power of a collaborative team. So there's a new book out by Marshall Goldsmith called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that's true both for you as a professional and as a development officer and for your donors. What we did in the past probably isn't going to work in the future, especially as it pertains to incorporating philanthropic planning into our personal, financial, and estate planning. And so, you know, we're going to indicate that smart people learn from their own experiences, but wise people learn from the experiences of others. So hopefully today we can help you all to become more wise by learning from the experiences of others as we have gleaned that knowledge over time. So we've got this saying, what they say is fact and what we say is opinion. So the point is, if you can get your donors to talk about what's really important to them, then you don't have to spray them with the facts about your organization's needs. And as we find that when we deal with clients and donors, it's more about the question than about stating facts. And we kind of all operate this way. I know I do. If I say something that's a fact or somebody else says it, well, you know, Elaine, if you tell me something, I'm going to say, well, that's your opinion. But if I say it, it comes out of my mouth, it's a fact, which may or not be a true fact, but at least in my mind it's a fact. Now, when we have levels of understanding as individuals, the first level is what we call fragmentary. That's when you're just receiving fragments of information. Level 2 of understanding is what we call comprehension, or, oh, I get it. Number 3 is, I see how this really relates to me. What's my relationship to the information? And number 4 is, I see how this integrates into my world. We call it inclusion. The problem is we often stop at level 2. But, you know, the real problem is people do not make major decisions, especially financial decisions, at level 2 of understanding, comprehension. They make those large decisions at levels 3 and levels 4 in the relationship and the inclusion area. So, questions that might help you get your donor to level 3 or level 4 is when they make a statement, you might say, what does that mean to you? Or what would that mean to your family if you made a gift to this organization? Those types of things. So constantly digging deeper and asking additional questions can help move us up the levels of understanding. So this pyramid shows our behavior over time as we become involved in something new. This is important for 2 reasons. First, you can see where you are now, and any other time you're looking at something new. It's also important to remember that your donors are going through the same pattern every time you bring them something new. So we're going to go up the pyramid. We're going to start with, where we start is we're unaware. We don't know. Then we become aware. Somebody shares some information with us. Then, if it's information that we have an interest in, we have an interest level. So far, so good. If we have an interest level, we might experiment and learn more about it, ask more questions. And then, if we got enough information, we come to a point of belief. As I said, you know, now what we say is fact, what you say is opinion. Belief would be the factual portion of that. And finally, the top level of understanding is commitment. When somebody makes a commitment, they're ready to act, they're ready to write a check, move assets, etc. Here is the dividing line. Below that line, even though you might believe in something, it's just a technique. But if you get pushback, you'll fall back to old patterns and look for scripts and so on to respond. But above the line, when you have commitment, it's your philosophy. It's who you are. So it doesn't matter if you get pushback. You just respond as to who you are. And that's true for all of us. Now let's overlay those 4 levels of understanding on top of the pyramid. And you can see that we go from level 1, level 2, to level 3. And where is level 4? It's above the line. It's that commitment. And that's where we want to take our conversations with our donors. And this takes time. You don't do this in a 5-minute conversation or even an hour conversation. These type of conversations might be conducted over a period of weeks, months, and sometimes even years. So often I'll ask our clients, and again, we do a very comprehensive financial and estate planning and philanthropic planning with very high net worth families. And so when we first meet a family, we'd say, would you rather have your children and grandchildren grow up to be donors or philanthropists? And I don't define either term. What do you think they all say? Most of the time they'll say, oh, I want them to be a philanthropist. So, you know, well, what's the difference between a donor and a philanthropist? Well, I would say it this way. When a philanthropist makes a gift, they give gifts from their soul. A donor gives gifts from their wallet. Another person might say, well, a donor goes to the charity's auction to buy something they want anyway at a discount. And then they actually like to get a little recognition from the organization for doing so. That's a donor. On the other hand, a philanthropist is the one who donates those items that are being auctioned off or spends their precious time obtaining the items in order to fulfill the mission of the organization. See the difference? Donors versus philanthropists. So, what is transformational philanthropy? We define it this way. A transformational gift is one that has a big impact on the donor as it does on the organization, which really has nothing to do with the size of the gift and everything to do with the passion behind the gift. Transformational philanthropy is all about getting at the donor client's passion as they make a gift. And as that happens, they become philanthropists when the gift hits their heart and helps them fulfill their values and passions not just the needs of your organization. So how do we create transformational gifts? Well, first, we need to ask appropriate questions to help your clients and donors identify and articulate their passions, or what we would call their core values. A couple of quick examples. This is kind of a touchy-feely question. What makes you cry? What would you die for? These are not just how's the weather type questions. These are pretty deep questions. So, but if you, through questioning, can help them discover where they even learned about their values and their passions, how they received them from prior generations, it will also help them pass on those values and passions to their next generation. So asking appropriate, detailed values-finding questions is the first step. So, and it's really important that, what are these appropriate questions? I guess what I would discover with you is that they need to be right-brain questions, not left-brain questions. Left-brain questions are all about facts and statistics and logic. Right-brain questions connect with what? The heart, the emotion. We'd also indicate that what questions are much better than why questions. If you ask a question and get an answer from the donor, you don't come back with, why do you feel that way? When you ask a why question, it puts the other person on the defense. They got to defend why I said what I just said. Or if you ask them a what question, what did that mean to you? What would be different in your world if thus and so happened? It doesn't put them on the defensive. It's really an interesting phenomenon when you change your why questions to what questions. And then, of course, we always want to ask open-ended questions, not closed-end questions that can be answered with a yes or a no or a one-word answer. You want to answer open-ended questions where it gives the donor a chance to really expound and share from their heart. Second, we want to provide opportunities for them to fulfill their passions. And you may or may not have that opportunity inside your organization once you find out what their passions are. And so it's really up to you to provide them with an opportunity to share their passions or fulfill their passions outside your organization if we're really going to be holistic about it. Third, you want to help them articulate the value of the gift to themselves. And you might do that by saying, what did that gift mean to you? Most people are never asked or realize what a major gift really meant to them. They know what it meant to the organization, but what did that do for them internally? What did that do for them in their heart? So we need to help them articulate that to themselves, because those types of experiences become more impactful and long-lasting. And the result, if we can help them fulfill their passions, this could even mean that part of the gift is not tax deductible. It may or may not be tax deductible. If the neighbor down the street needs a refrigerator and we give them a refrigerator and that's part of our passion, that's not going to be deductible. It's not tax motivated. So if you can help donors meet their passions, they might even go out and solicit their friends to become donors to your organization, because they become passionate about the mission of the organization, not just the immediate needs of the organization. And the results for philanthropy in general, huge and long-lasting. In our work with high net worth individuals, we find when we help them pull together a plan to make a major or planned gift, that doesn't happen in one sitting. It often takes, you're not going to like this, it even takes years to develop. We're working with a family right now that for about the last 7 years, we've been talking to them about when they finally sell their business, what they will do with the proceeds. And as part of that strategic plan, we proposed ahead of time that a portion of the sale proceeds would go into a charitable trust to benefit the community after they're gone, but to also benefit them during their lifetime. Well, you don't just put a charitable trust together in the spur of the moment. We actually had to develop this trust and have it on hold so that if a buyer came along to buy their business, we'd be ready. And so we actually completed a charitable trust several months ago, and 2 weeks ago a buyer came along ready to buy. So now we're ready to transact that major gift rather than start from scratch. But we had planted that seed 7 years ago so that they would be prepared as part of their overall plan to make that major and planned gift when the time came. So we're going to go on to the next theme, and that is creating multi-generational transformational gifts within families, being able to pass that down from one generation to the next. So here's the problem, or the challenge. Traditional financial estate planning has failed to keep families and their fortunes together for 3 or more generations, and that has been true for centuries all over the world. Now let me explain that. In China, 2,000 years ago, they had a saying that said, wealth never survives 3 generations. This was 2,000 years ago. In England in 1350, they had a phrase that said, clogs to clogs in 3 generations. In Spain in the 1500s, their phrase was, first generation was a trader, second generation was a gentleman, the third generation was a beggar. Are you seeing the theme develop here? In Germany in the 1700s, seldom 3 descents continue good. Those Germans have a way with words, don't they? Okay, I've got, oh, here we go. And in the U.S. in the 1800s, from shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Many people have heard that saying and they know what it means. And finally, in Brazil in the 1900s, their phrase is from the stables to the stars to the stables in 3 generations. So what do we learn from history? It's not geography, it's not cultures, economics, governments, tax structures, they don't matter. Families rarely keep their money and their families together for more than 3 generations. Isn't that something? And what we found is that only about 10% of all families are able to succeed in holding their families and their fortunes together past 3 generations. Statistically, that's the number. And so that came out of a study by the Heritage Institute a number of years ago. And of course, that study went back for many, many years, and they found that this was true not only in the U.S., but in these other countries as well. So, you know, it's so what the Heritage Institute out of Portland, Oregon has done is they studied what the 10% of families that succeeded to hold their wealth and their families together past 3 generations, what did they do differently? And here's what they found. They had several common traits. And what you don't see on this page is that they had good financial planners, good estate planners, good accountants, good attorneys, good bankers, good trust officers, good insurance people, good investors. I don't see that anywhere on that slide, do you? No, what the 10% that succeeded had as common traits were they built within their family a culture of communication and trust. So that is the most important thing. And do you know how much time families spend on that these days? Not much. It's not done on Twitter, and it's not done on Facebook. It needs to be done face-to-face in an organized fashion. And we'll talk to you about how that's done here in a minute. These families also had a shared vision among the generations. They were all kind of going in the same direction because that vision was passed down from generation 1 to generation 2 to generation 3 as they shared their vision through communication and trust building by meeting on a regular basis as a family. They also had a balanced view of wealth, which included philanthropy. What we find is philanthropy is one of the keys to helping families hold their wealth and their family harmony together from generation to generation, and I'll address that in a little bit here. And then finally, those successful families provided training and mentoring for each generation. Training and mentoring in areas such as listening, being empathetic, understanding one another. We're just talking about families talking about these things within the family. We're not talking about the family business here. We're talking about the business of being a family. So as we talk about a balanced view of wealth, if you look at this, this chart in the upper left-hand corner, we have what we call human capital. That's kind of the foundation. That's our people in our family, their health, their talents, their backgrounds, their attitudes. it's kind of what you come with, you know. Sometimes it includes family heirlooms that have no financial value. It's grandma's quilt, grandpa's pocket watch. I have my grandfather's pocket watch. That's all I ended up with because he didn't have a whole lot, but it means a lot to me. That's part of the foundation of my family. In the upper right-hand corner, we have what we call the intellectual capital of a family. And that's really the sum total of our family's life experience, their formal and informal education, our relationships, our work ethics, our commitment to spiritual beliefs and practices. That's what we call our intellectual capital as a family. In the lower left-hand corner, we have our financial capital. Well, that refers, of course, to our material wealth, our real estate, our cars, our stocks, bonds, life insurance, retirement plan accounts, and that type of thing. We know what that is. And then the fourth element, though, for a balanced view of wealth, is our social capital. That's our contribution back to society. And our responsibilities of being good citizens and good neighbors. And sometimes that includes financial charitable gifts, but it also includes volunteer work. So this is what we look at as having a balanced view of wealth. Now let me ask you a question. If you had to rank these categories in orders of importance in your life, which would be the last on your list that you'd want to pass on to future generations? You know what most people say? Financial. That can be rebuilt. Human capital, intellectual capital, and social capital, those are mindsets and attitudes. They are not easily rebuilt. They need to be passed on. In fact, I once heard someone ask, would you rather have Michael Jordan's basketball shoes or his jump shot? Well, I think you get a lot further with his jump shot than his shoes, or nice the shoes are. How about Tiger Woods? Would you rather have his golf clubs or his swing? Or Shakespeare, would you rather have the pen that he wrote with or his wit? You get the idea? Most people would say, if I had to give up one of these four aspects of my wealth for future generations, it would be the financial aspect. And yet, that's where most people spend all their time with their advisors planning, is on the financial side. And that's why 90% of families and their wealth are disconnected by the end of 3 generations. So as we talk about future generations, what we call G2, Generation 2, that would be your children, Generation 3, your grandchildren, we call those growing philanthropists. And so, you know, as we talk about trying to enroll those generations in our philosophy of philanthropy as parents or grandparents, every time someone is posed with something new as a question, they ask themselves these 2 questions. Is it worth it? And can I do it? This comes from a book called The Influencer by Patterson, Grady, Maxwell, McMillan, and Spitzler back in 2008. It's a great read if you haven't read it. Because here's what happens. Even though we can do something, if it's not worth it to us, we won't do it. If it's not worth it to us, we won't do it. So that's the questions that we ask ourselves internally whenever we're posed with a new decision or a new topic to consider. So, you know, what we want to do is find out what core values that we want to share from G1 to G2. And, you know, that doesn't mean that G2 is going to inherit all of our values or agree with all of our values. But, you know, let's say that I have 8 core values. I'd be happy if my next generations had 4 of those 8. They're individuals. They're going to make their own decisions. But they're still always going to ask the question, particularly in the area of making major financial and charitable gifts, is it worth it, and can I do it? So, again, what we've done by getting involved with this Heritage Institute out of Portland, they do a lot of training and provide us with technical support and have their own publishing company in this area of heritage. They've helped us learn how to engage in what we call the 3rd element of planning, to build families and prepare the heirs to receive their inheritance. So the first leg of the stool is financial planning to build your wealth. The second leg of the stool is estate planning to pass your financial wealth on. But the 3rd element is known as heritage design. The Heritage Institute has identified these common elements that families use to sustain their wealth and unity across generations, and synthesize those elements into a 6-step process and a structure that any family can replicate, and they call it the heritage process. Now, as you know, we deal a lot with families with substantial net worth, but this heritage design process can be used with families at any net worth. It's really a function of what do they care about passing on to future generations, and how important is family harmony to them, as opposed to just having more dollar signs behind their name. So here's how this heritage process was designed. A little diagram here. First begins just with initial conversation, and in fact, we have a couple of nonprofits that bring us into these conversations. I just had one last week with a development director from a charity that been talking to a donor about this. The donor had been suggesting that they were really concerned that this was a G1 type donor, and they built substantial wealth. They sold their company a number of years ago for $1 gazillion. And their big concern was, you know, am I going to ruin my kids by giving them too much too soon? So I want to pass on my heritage to them. I want to pass on my values before I pass on my valuables after I'm gone. So we had an initial conversation last week and kind of discussed this process, and they decided to move forward with the next step, which is what we call a guided discovery interview. A guided discovery interview is a recorded interview where we ask them open-ended questions of a donor or a couple, and starting with, tell me about your grandparents and your great-grandparents. Who were they? What was important to them? What have you received from them as far as values that you want to pass on to future generations? We record that session, and that session usually runs between 4 and 7 hours long, because they're really telling us their whole life story of where they've come from, and then when they got married, and when they had children and built their business, and also what they see for the future of their family. This all gets recorded and sent off to a professional journalist who transcribes that recording and turns it into what we call the heritage statement, kind of really the family's history and the family's vision for the future. And those heritage statements will often be in the volume of 30 to 50 pages long, and they become a very foundational tool for then having future meetings and discussions with the family members, with the children, with the grandchildren, with the in-laws, the outlaws. We bring them all together for what's called Initial Heritage Day. It's a full-day session where we do some exercises that deal with listening, deal with family values, deal with communication, building trust. This is not a financial planning day. This is not a day to describe what the estate plan is. This is a very foundational day to really discuss what was found in Generation 1's heritage statement. And we supplied Generations 2 and 3 with the heritage statement for their reference, and it becomes then a source for them to make future decisions as a family. And one of those decisions, of course, is what we do with our family philanthropy. Now, the thing I got to mention, the next slide here shows that once we have the heritage statement, and even before we have our initial Heritage Day, we'll often get together with the donors' professional advisors, their accountant, their attorney, their financial planner, their insurance agent, their investment advisor, their banker, whoever they feel is on their advisory team, and share with them the heritage statement to make certain that that client's existing financial and estate plans are consistent with their heritage statement as far as where they've come from and what they want for future generations. Most often we find that they aren't in complete alignment, because most often the financial and estate plans are more financially oriented, of course, tax oriented, and little attention has been paid to the transfer of values along with the valuables. And the collaborative team of advisors really finds this helpful, because then it allows them to kind of tweak their current plans and their documents and arrangements and so on in such a way as to really be more fulfilling to the family and more long-lasting, which all the professional advisors really like and appreciate as well. So this process does not replace the traditional financial planning and estate planning process. It actually enhances it dramatically and makes it more long-lasting. So then after the initial Heritage Day, then the family tries to come together on an annual basis to have ongoing Heritage Days. And we might have a theme of those days talking about listening, empathy, leadership, personal and family development, teamwork, and on and on and on. And these days are all moderated by a certified heritage professional. And usually after the first year, we actually set up what's called a family council. And the family council is used to kind of share family responsibility. So we kind of take the responsibility for leading the family and future generations off of Generation 1's shoulders and begin passing that mantle down through a series of training and mentoring and so on. So this is what the 10% of successful families have done to hold their family and their wealth together past 3 generations. Heritage Institute just happened to put it together in a very legitimate and specified process that's supported by some very valuable research. So the natural byproduct of doing multi-generational planning is we then end up with multi-generational donors and hopefully philanthropists. And what this does is provides long-term stable funding for charities. Because if you have a donor and they pass away and you don't know their family, guess what? You're not going to receive those annual gifts anymore from that donor. And they hopefully maybe have left you a planned gift that will keep on giving. But wouldn't it be great if you could have gotten connected because your organization fulfills the passion of both G1 and G2 and even G3, so that you can continue in relationship for another generation and another generation, which provides a lot more stable long-term funding for your organization. Philanthropy, as I indicated, philanthropy becomes a binding source to help families hold themselves together for future generations, even when the future generations have disparate political views and disparate views on how they want to live their life. There's something about philanthropy that's really neutral, and we can all get around doing something for someone else, and that's one area that we don't have to argue about. So philanthropy is a wonderful tool in doing multi-generational planning with these families. So again, this whole thing of mindset is everything. Not about balance sheets, it's about mindset. So the question that you need to ask yourselves, are you building relationship with your donors to finally get to the ask? And that ask shouldn't be coming up front. That has to come after you build relationship. And that relationship building can take quite a while, but it's really worth it if you're ever hoping to achieve a major or a large planned gift, because most of the time those only happen once or twice in a donor's lifetime, and they're not going to take that lightly, and they're only going to do it with someone that they know and trust and an organization that fulfills their passions. And so it's important for you to help them understand their passions and then provide the opportunity to fulfill those passions. Then the ask becomes quite natural at that point. Transformation does not come from doing things bigger, better, faster, and doing more of it. It comes from starting from a different place. In other words, what got you here won't get you there. We have to start at a different place than we have in the past. Now, from a professional point of view, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we call the power of a collaborative team. So, what are the chances that you as a development officer will have the skills, training, and tools necessary to maximize your donor's ability to fulfill his or her passions? Pretty slim. None of us have all the answers. So what you need to do is have a collaborative team of professionals available to help your donors if they do not have all the advisors that they need. Now, a collaborative team is much different than a group of advisors who advise the same client. That's what most people think of when we talk about collaborative team. No, most clients already have a team of advisors who are just simply professional silos who communicate with each other once in a while. That's not a collaborative team. A fully collaborative team is very different. It's a team of advisors who work together using all of their resources, who they are in addition to their professional skills, and work together and support each other to maximize their benefit for the client and the donor. And in our work with collaborative teams, it just continues to amaze me. We had a collaborative team meeting just this week with a family and their advisors. And in fact, we even did some technology where one of the advisors was 2,000 miles away because they were on vacation, but they took time out to join our collaborative team meeting. And so technology, we had the whole group there, and we had that group together with the family and worked through some very sticky issues regarding of transferring some business property to Generation 2 and what that's going to mean to Generation 3, and then how does philanthropy fit into all that. But when you have all the advisors around the table together, they can all see what's going on in the faces and the hearts and minds of the donors, as well as their next generations. And we came to some terrific conclusions in a 5-hour meeting that normally would have taken the donor 2 to 3 weeks of going back and forth, talking to each advisor, and then getting it all mixed up. What we find is donors and clients hate to be in the middle of that. They want someone else to run a collaborative team for them and just simply give them the answers they're looking for and give them the guidance. And that's what a collaborative team does. So here's an example of the results of this type of a concept. This comes out of Wilmington Trust, out of Wilmington, Delaware, and one of their key players out there is a fellow by the name of Tom Rogerson. He's been on the staff of a lot of the major Eastern banks, and he's not a banker. He's really a heritage-type planner, and what he did was he kept track of a major community foundation out east from 1999 to 2006. And during that period of time, that organization held 18 planned giving events. He was the presenter at 11 of them, and other speakers presented the other 7. Okay? And of course, when Tom Rogerson speaks, he doesn't speak about grits and grats and gruts and gruts, and he speaks about the very thing that we've been talking about today, getting in touch with people's passions and being transformational in philanthropy and passing on heritage from one generation to the next. The total number of attendees at those functions were 503. Rogerson had 288 of them in his 11 events, and 215 were by the other speakers. Here's it's interesting. What happened afterwards? Follow-up conversations. And, of course, every major and planned gift starts with a conversation. There were 87 follow-up conversations out of the 503 attendees after those events, 75 of which wanted to talk to Rogerson, and only 12 of which wanted to talk to the other speakers who were more technical in nature. Then we kept track of the number of gifts that developed out of all those 18 events. 21. 17 were attributed to Rogerson, and only 4 to the other speakers. Well, that gets your attention. Now let's put some dollar amounts with that. Those 21 gifts totaled $12,124,000 in value. $11,900,000 were associated with Rogerson's 17 gifts, $208,000 with the other 4. I think you're getting the picture. Does transformational philanthropy belong here? It certainly shows the results, and we've seen similar results in our work with donors. Here's another analysis of the presentations. We're not going to get into that. We're running a little short of time. But you can see, of those gifts, I can tell you that of the 17, 58% were outright gifts, 23% were planned gifts, and 5 were bequests. 17% were bequests. So that's what happens when you have a professional come along and do your education in small groups with donors, as opposed to just having a technical discussion of this is how a charitable trust works, this is why you need to bequest in your will. That is not motivating. It is not transformational. So some next steps of, to create your process for introducing the concept of transformational philanthropy to your donors, clients, and philanthropists, and you need to create your process for helping your donors and philanthropists identify and articulate their passions either personally or through collaboration. And so we need to, the process has to include helping them identify and articulate their passions and their core values, helping them identify opportunities for them to fulfill their passions, which again may be outside your organization, and helping your donors and philanthropists identify, acknowledge what the gift meant to them. And that can be best done, what we've found, is through having a process such as this heritage process that can be applied. And if you'd like to learn more about how we can help you meet your donors' needs through this process, the Heritage Institute has allowed us to partner with certain nonprofit organizations. They have what they call a partnership arrangement That means that you don't have to become certified to become a certified heritage professional. To become a certified heritage planning professional takes 100 hours of classroom training and about $17,000 of tuition. So this is probably not something that's in your budget. However, if you can partner with a certified heritage professional, we have 3 of them in our firm, you as a partner can join into that and get in front of donors with this kind of information, very legitimately have access to all of the materials, both printed and audiovisual, that the Heritage Institute provides. So, so think about hooking up with a certified heritage planner that could deal with those certain tier of your donors who really want to become philanthropists rather than just being donors. With that, we're at a point of asking if there are any questions.
Thank you, John, for sharing your expertise on transformational philanthropy with us. Are there any questions?
Okay, I got to go to the right button on my machine here. All right. The questions are not rolling in. It must have been very clear. We'll give you another minute or two if there are any questions. If not, you can always call our office and call the Charitable Giving Resource Center, which is connected with Transition Point, and visit with Elaine Kai or Sue McEntee, and they can connect us for further information.
That's right. Thank you, John. In closing, as John said, if you're interested in learning more on this topic or any other topic, please let us know. You can find us online at www.magnifyyourimpact.com, on Facebook, or call us at 515-277-4050. Be on the lookout for details on the upcoming 2013 Fundraising University that will be held in September. On behalf of Charitable Giving Resource Center, thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day.